So I help a lot of people move from other states. Did you know that most people think of moving to Texas before they think of moving to Oklahoma? So why do Californians think of moving to Texas first before moving to Oklahoma? I mean, they see their friends doing it. Lots of people are moving to Texas. It's really popular. Let's consider Oklahoma for a minute. So is living in Oklahoma like living in California? We're gonna be talking about the relationship between these two states. So to me, asking the question like, is it the same living in Oklahoma as it is living in California is like saying like, oh, it's the same living in Barcelona, Spain as it is living in Stockholm, Sweden. They're the same distance apart. Like Oklahoma, California, Spain, and Sweden are actually the same distance apart. Of course, the big difference is that here in the US, everyone, speaks English. That's the language we speak, versus like two totally separate countries. But to me, it often feels like two totally separate countries. So let's talk about that. I'm Marcie Billen and I'm a real estate agent here in Oklahoma. So the similarities between California and Oklahoma, town sizes, the way that these towns feel are often dictated by population, right? So LA's population is around 12.5 million people. Oklahoma City's population for the metro is around 1 million people, and Tulsa's is very similar, if not just slightly smaller. Now I realize that most of you are not gonna be living in LA. Like, that's a generalization for California, and I'm so sorry about that. So for an easier comparison, let's take a place like Pasadena, which is, outside of LA, college town. The population of Pasadena at this time is around 152,000 people. So Oklahoma doesn't have any towns of that size. We have Norman, which is the third largest city after Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and it comes in at around 125,000 for its population. And it's a college town as well. So Berkeley, outside of San Francisco, is another great comparison for like Norman, which is the third largest city, as I said, in Oklahoma. Berkeley has a population of around 120,000, where, Norman is 125,000. But let's talk about Bakersfield. So why would we talk about Bakersfield, California? So the population there is around 700,000. So this is significant for Oklahomans. So why is it significant? Bakersfield is known as like the little Oklahoma of California. And this is because in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, we had this thing in Oklahoma called the Dust Bowl. And basically farmers had stripped lands of their grasses, and then it stopped raining, and then dust flew up and caused a lot of death, sickness, and destruction. So then Okies, people from Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, and Colorado, ended up leaving this part of the country and going to Bakersfield, California. I still know families who have, relatives in Bakersfield or around in California. I know families that have, just families split between the two states. Because while California experienced that boom, Oklahoma was in that deep, deep depression in the 1930s. If you hear something howling, it's the wind, because the wind is just going crazy here today. So I'm sorry about that, but it's Oklahoma, we can't help the wind. So Okies who made this trip from Oklahoma to California were ridiculed. They were called second-class citizens, made fun of, given the worst jobs ever. And thankfully, we are not seeing that reciprocated in this mass exodus we're seeing of people leaving California and coming to Oklahoma. You may hear about it in other states, for sure. Like I hear about Californians moving to Montana and how much, people in Montana are kind of loathing that. Texas is very similar. I have yet to hear anyone in Oklahoma complain about a Californian coming here. So Oklahoma City is the 6th fastest growing metro area in the entire United States. So that means we're experiencing a boom. So this boom is in large part due to different sectors of our economy, like aerospace engineering, hospitality, tech. All of these things contribute to this boom that we see here in Oklahoma. So in comparison, California's largest sectors are agriculture is number one, which you often think that that's not the case, but agriculture is definitely number one in California. And then you have other things like film in California, finance. I mean, basically California is a country on its own. I know its economy is bigger than most countries in the world. So the fact is, Oklahoma right now is experiencing a boom, and it's, you know, to me, it's similar to the boom that California experienced in the mid-century, and now it's Oklahoma's turn. It kind of seems like an overnight boom here in Oklahoma. We've been working on this. We've been working to improve our state for, you know, decades at this point. So that's where this is coming from. So we really can't forget too about the ability that people have to work from home now. It's one of the reasons that we see this kind of exodus from California. So if you have the ability to work from home and you want to live in a place with a lower cost of living, then Oklahoma might be a really good option for you in that. So if you are planning to move here for economic reasons to Oklahoma, you're probably bringing your family. You're probably wondering about our schools and school rankings here in the state of Oklahoma. So Oklahoma ranks 42nd or 43rd, depending on the source that you're looking at, in public education for all of the states in the US. 42nd or 43rd. That's how it ranks. California ranks at about 40 for their public education system. So in those respects, we're pretty similar. I get asked about private schools all the time in Oklahoma, and yes, we do have private schools available, both religious and secular private schools. So a lot of people that end up moving to Oklahoma do end up moving for retirement purposes. So if you're moving from California to Oklahoma for retirement purposes, it may be associated, of course, to cost of living expenses. So that brought me to healthcare. I wanted to see how we ranked in terms of healthcare here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma ranks nationally as 48th in healthcare. So then California is actually ranked number 1 in public health and number 21 in access to healthcare. So I'm really selling California here for you. There are so many reasons that people choose to move, and culture tends to be one of those big reasons. So one thing that people say about my fellow Oklahomans is that we are exceedingly nice and exceedingly courteous, and that is not a compliment that I hear from most Californians about Californians. We're just nicer, I guess, here in Oklahoma. So politically, Oklahoma is a very Republican state, and this ties into some cultural things in that. So Oklahoma is actually the second most or fourth most Republican state in the union. And, you know, it just depends on what source you're looking at. But, you know, the overall gist is very Republican, a very red state. And this is often tied to things like beliefs about tax structures and then gun control. We are an open carry state here in Oklahoma. You know, you get to have one, like no matter what. And then things like family values are extremely important here in Oklahoma. And that is the main conversation you'll hear from our state government. So California is viewed, of course, as a state run by Democrats, and I can't comment too much on it. I don't live in California, but I've just heard from people that, you know, they're unhappy with the way things are going in the state since, you know, the end of the last decade, essentially, that things are just not moving in the direction of helping people. So that is, you know, all tied to culture and all tied up in what you prefer as an individual and where you're living. So you're gonna have to come to your own conclusions about whether or not, like living in Oklahoma is like living in California. Like it's not, obviously, like they're not at all alike. The fact of the matter is, like, can you handle living in Oklahoma if you've been raised or worked in California, or maybe you want that sort of change in your life? So thanks so much for watching. If you have thoughts about Oklahoma versus California, you can drop those into the comments below, and I will see you later.